Hello, what I want to talk about today is SDD on the Enterprise Mirror process. That means we have a complete structure that is specs-driven development that I developed to manage many processes in the regulated industries. And this concept is made to stick with your existing environment. It's like central nervous system for your process, and that's like a highway connecting all the dots in your process and helping to leverage human collaboration and AI. And this is the details that I want to share with you. Then first, Enterprise Mirror is about sovereignty and to preserve the source that you already have. And for example, some of you are using Polarion, others are using Jira X-Ray, IBM Doors, and many systems, even hybrid and custom systems. For the existing system that we have, we know how to use them. For the hybrid system, we can interact very easily with many sources of information. Then first, we will mirror what you have in your information, because you have a lot of source of different things that works on different way. And the pain we already discover at many places is that people doesn't have the capability to translate a system to another correctly with a fluent way. So by interacting with all the APIs and the MCP that we also create the MCP layer on top of it, we have a new way to structure the data that we get from different sources in the SDD format. And the SDD format is a very large process about some very detailed process like intent, requirement, but also specification, acceptance criteria, issue, document, risk, test, decision, evidence, and many more that I spent next 9 months to develop and to understand exactly the data structure. My personal experience as a 30 years as a software developer and 10 years as a software architect make me able to create very highly modelized systems that collaborate perfectly together. And that was the most important part of the fundamental structure. Then we will take your Polarion requirements and Polarion items, every items indeed, requirement, test case, test run, everything that is already existing and that can be used as a documentation to mirror that in a very structured way that we can leverage collaboration on it. That means, for example, we can take requirements and say that we want to feed Jira on some way. We can do that, of course, already in Polarion with work tools and workflows. And we can do that in many tools, but SDD, so specs-driven development, is capable of maintaining all your system together with high consistency, with version following and track and risk analysis and many things down the road, because this system is very large and honestly it's not a simple tool. I must tell you that it's not something that you install and you have magic the day just after, but you will see the value and the result at the moment you begin to use it, because it will help you to transform, move and improve data and quality around all your systems, and also to leverage every knowledge you accumulated for dozens of years, sometime in certain complex industry about engineering, software development and everything, that will all create a context that will be used to transform certain part of your process and your flow. For example, here we have the context that helps to make people collaborate, but maybe it's not clear enough to start with that. What we should do is to understand how you have already a lot of value, which is data, and you probably know it because I think half of the value of a company is the data they have. And this is very important because usually I see that this data is not used at all. It's stored, it's archived, it's well documented. Every process is very well documented, and sometimes people who left the company left a very high level of quality of legacy, sometimes lower level. It depends how we use it, but it was used at the moment to create value in your company, and your company needs to leverage on that. And to leverage on that, I mean, when we will have a very specific issue to fix. For example, we need to take legacy software, and this software was used at the moment, but for many reasons you decided to rewrite this software and to make a new version, and some features are still in the old software. What we will do here is to engineer the code from your software, from the documentation you have about it and everything you can find as a piece of the puzzle. And we will say, okay, we want to retro-engineer all the requirement and specification and make a complete map of what was this value inside the software. Then starting on that, we will have the first landscape of what is exactly your process, that was exactly this process. And then starting on that, we can decide, okay, we have now the complete structure, we understand what was done, and people in the management and high management can understand what was the value because it's readable as a root requirement, a very top requirement declined in sub requirement. Again, sorry for the length of this explanation, but these are not simple things, and I really want to improve quality in the process that you are making. And I think it's, if you want faster things, there is other tools that will probably promise you magic, and I don't know if it works, and we will never know. But this process requires engagement, and it's the only way, I think, to reach the quality that we can achieve by leveraging all this process. Then let's say that you have your legacy system and you want to leverage it to maybe insert these features and add the previous features in your new solution software, for example. Then the first thing is that we will write specification to know how we will implement it. And when we will use the specification to know how we implement it, we will use all the context available to understand how things must be done. It can be the visual identity, it can be the business rules, the science rules for people who are making things at a very complex level, or engineering rules. Plus we will say, okay, we want to be medical device compliant, or we want to be this ISO and this AIC compliant. Then this is already highly documented in your process, then the context is there. And that's why when we use, for example, AI to produce a software with a new version, with a high quantity of change, often the track is lost because everything you give to your AI is the context of the moment of what you want to do exactly. But what you want to do doesn't describe you, doesn't describe your business. And what you have is much more valuable than this. And that's why SDD will use every part of your knowledge by storing it in a very structured way, but also in a very large searchable context way, which will be thousands of documents and thousands of, sometimes millions of code lines and everything, to create first, started from the requirement that we have and that we want to add to an existing project, for example, to create specification of how we want to implement them on a coherent manner, to make sure that the new implementation is corresponding to your already existing structure. Then your developer understands it. There is documentation about what was done and how it was done. You have a lot of comments around every change. And then first step is to start with the specification. From the specification, I will try to go very fast to the end, but from the specification, we will decline acceptance criteria, which are the most important layer in the process. The acceptance criteria will define if a specification is filled. And why is it that important? Is because if you try to rely only on specification, then you will never be able to change the specification, because it will be a text of, let's say, 10 lines, and every time you will have to change it, you will have to consider if the tests, for example, that are covering this specification are still relevant. And if it's not the case, you will lose track of everything and things will be in contradiction. We can have contradiction between requirements. Sometimes that's a very bad situation, and that's how we also analyze on the semantic to avoid that. But having a misleading specification going to test or going to proof or anything that has a value on a semantic and structured way is very dangerous for your process, because at the moment it will become a big ball of mud that we called in development. And starting on that, we have then this acceptance criteria that are a pillar. This pillar will decline every acceptance criteria in automatic test and manual test. Then we will have OQ, IQ, FAT, SAT, test protocol in many ways, test suite, things that we can execute with humans, so that people who audit your company will understand that the process was respected and that you fill the requirement that you engage to when you declare that you have an auditable process. Then from the specification and from the requirement, we will also decline the risk, and the risk will be detailed, and there will be, let's say, automatically generated, because we have an engine to produce risk analysis which is 99% compliant with the intent that we want. And honestly, I never had to read back all the risks, because I know they are very well defined, and that's too much security, sometimes too much edge case coverage, but who can predict what can happen on the client side? And I prefer to have the crash on my machine or have a test that doesn't pass because we evaluate too much risk than too much problem that we don't cover. And then starting on all of that, we have an ecosystem that manage all of that. And I want to go back to the idea of the enterprise mirror rollout, because we have this existing data that you want to conserve because you trust this system that you use maybe for 15 years. We leverage them to get the data into a controlled cloud or on-premise installation on your side, and everything can be totally controlled and totally isolated. Then we will stabilize the project. We will make sure that everything works correctly in the mirror, which is kind of totally automatic because the system was very well trained to understand enterprise data. Then we will allow users to read the content, and you will see that this is a content that you have for 15 years or 20 or 30 years, but people will discover the content that, oh yeah, we had this requirement, or why do we have two projects talking about exactly the same thing in complete different categories, or why do we have this structure on a tree that is not fitting on our expectation, because the previous VP has decided to make a project, but the new VP has the other plans, and everything was still in place because no one cleaned the process. Then you will have from every key user, QA, developers, managers, stakeholders, any person who have access to the system, a different point of view, and they will be able to focus on what is important, what they can review, what they can approve, what they can gate, because we have a lot of gatekeeper. That's not a system to make one person work. Then from that, every collaboration, from the process of testing, for example, to the development process, to the requirement process and definition of what can be decided to change on a CCB, and this kind of complex problems that we mostly use talking and meetings to decide, will be accessible by many systems, by many ways. And again, it's not only a system, it's a philosophy. It's a way to say, okay, what is my company's value? My company's value is requirements and specification. This is the DNA. This is the plan of how your business is supposed to run. And if you don't have that, you can spend millions in trainings to help people to understand what is the concept and how it should be used in a good practice. Never everybody will understand everything. Then you have to control. You have to have a governance on the process, and whether which level you are involved in, you can take advantage of having this kind of fluent system that manage the flow. And again, the system is specs-driven development. Here we are on SpecsDrivenDevelopment.com because I was early on this idea. Now it's a concept. It's not only about my product, it's also a process that you can leverage without the product, because it's a way of thinking. It's like the next generation of lean process, but with automation and AI inside. Then we want to help in pains that you have. When I describe the project, the process of getting an old process and use this capability again, you can also imagine that you can brainstorm new plans and write 20 new potential requirements and decompose it and see how it can fit to your business. How is the time estimate to manage the process? Honestly, the code writing is from the past. And if I talk to developers, I want to be clear. Code is no more paying activity, because it's too fast to do much better quality result if you have the correct context. Then I encourage all developers to understand that and to use this power to put their mind in a different position of controlling the process, of understanding the architecture, of be a very good advisor for your managers to say what should be done and what should not be done, and also to teach people around, if you have more experience because you are technical IT, how they can do things with AI and what they should not do with AI, and what are the risk, the benefits, and everything. Then developers will probably execute the code automatically, because there is function in MCP which is called solve requirement. That means you take a requirement, you take a project, you say solve requirement, you give the ID, and it will be executed with full description. And during the process, it will describe also if there is new risk and new tests to implement, manual and automatic. Then there will be a flow. This flow is automated, and we can create a lot of value with that. We can create prototype, we can create MCP, and we can create complete solution, because it has a QA aspect which is really big. And honestly, QA people are loving this system, and every QA people I talk to want to use it, and that's already a good thing. Then, because honestly, in many companies, QA vs other department is not always easy, because QA have the good way to implement good practice, and nobody want to listen to them, because everybody wants to invent a new way of working. But there is many very smart people who invented norms and stored wisdom in these norms, and we should use them, because not only because it's compliant and not at the end of the project, but at the first line of the project, we should understand why we leverage norms, why we want to improve the quality process of the overall system, and why it has to be controlled step by step with a risk management. People have to understand ISO 31000 and everything to well establish a flow which is fast, powerful, and in control. I will leave it there for today, because I wanted to just leverage the Enterprise Mirror process, but we have other use case. There is a lot of other use case that you could discover here that explain exactly how we help people role by role and how we manage the flow. But honestly, that's a product that I will sell as a license that can have different forms and can have different format depending of who will use it. And also that will be a consultancy work because I have to educate users and to teach them. There will be video, there will be a lot of video of training to understand, and that will be completely free to have access to all the video I will produce to explain the concept. But when I put people hands-on this system, first, they understand very quickly the advantage, and second, they create value on the next days based on that, and they are very happy to do so. So I would like to help you to solve all kind of issue you can have with your process, and it's very large topic. I'm not trying to solve a tiny part of the problem. I'm not a niche person. I'm not a commercial. I'm really not a commercial. And then I don't try to identify one problem and solve it. I was spending the last 10 years in the pharma industry, and I know about the process that are very strong and very careful and very audited and secured. And I made this tool to make everything I have to do faster, better, and easier. And the control and the end of the process, which is the delivery on the market, is much faster. Then we have more iteration, we have more product, and we have more outcome, and of course we have more income by doing so, because you know how it how improvement can help clients ask you more and more value, and there is a high demand on every regulated market, and you want to serve this value, and I want to help you to serve this value. I leave you there. Thank you for listening if you did till the end. See you next time.